Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's movie blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're going to be talking about Game of Thrones. So just be warned, if you have not seen last night's episode, The Battle of Winterfell, then you might want to avoid this episode because there is indeed going to be some spoilers about certain plot points that happen. So you indeed have been warned. Now there's been a lot of talk, a lot of controversy, a lot of opinions about whether or not this episode was good or whether or not this episode was bad. I think there are people on both sides of the argument that do have very valid points. For those who hated this episode, I definitely understand why you would be mad, seeing that you've had pretty much since the beginning of the show this build-up for Jon Snow to be the one to at least be able to face off against the Night King at least once during the series, seeing that that's pretty much been one of the main parts, one of the main stories of this entire show. And of course, if you saw last night's episode, that did not happen. What instead he did was he kept trying to get to the Night King, but things kept getting in his way. And of course, a lot of people have their thoughts on that. So again, I totally understand why people didn't like it. There are other people, though, who do like it. And again, I think that there are definitely some positive things to talk about when it comes to this show and this comes to this episode as well. I do think that the actors are still very good. I think that all of them have, just really come into their own when it comes to their roles. I think that all of them are playing their roles very well. And I think that their characters have really become a part of who they are. And I think that in order to do that in a series is something that is impressive, no matter whether or not the writing for the character is good or bad, or whether it's inconsistent, which I would say is probably the most accurate statement about this entire series, is that it's inconsistent, because we had about 4 great seasons, much of which was based off of the books, which is why it was such, good work, good writing, good character development, and then all of a sudden we've had the last few years a bunch of kind of just mixed seasons. I would say that the first 4 are almost all solid. I can rewatch them again, no problems at all. And then the last 3 seasons, there's some episodes I really like, and there's some episodes that I don't really like. I would actually say, starting with that 5th season, more than half, like 75% of the episodes, I thoroughly enjoyed with very few and very little, actual complaints. And then I would say the following season after that, it got a little bit more, and then by season 7 was definitely more of a 50-50 split for me, and that was not just as far as good episodes, bad episodes, but like having good stuff and bad stuff in each of the episodes themselves, because it came to the point where I just felt like we were getting nothing but non-stop exposition, that slow burn. And I can appreciate the slow burn. I like the slow burn when it's done well, but when you have a TV series and you already have a show and characters that have been going on for several years, and you're starting to ignore major plots and major character arcs in the books that you have not touched upon yet, because I have friends that read the books and they kept telling me about all these really cool things I could look forward to, and many of those things just never happened. So I think that there are definitely some valid points and valid criticisms to be said that the writing for the show has not been nearly as good as it was in the very beginning. All that being said, as you can see, my dog River has a lot of thoughts about this show and this episode as well. But I have to say, when it comes to me, I think that this episode was fine. I think it was fine because it was finally an episode where there was action. If you have been following me on my live streams, you know that I have hated the first 2 episodes of this season because we had to wait almost 2 years for this entire season. This entire season was supposed to be the culmination of the many, many years that this show has now been going on. And what did we get? We got 2 episodes of filler fluff that could have all been condensed into 1 episode. You see, if you want to actually do this right, if you want to actually make a solid season, here's what you do. You have 1 episode of setup, of exposition. Then this episode you have as an actual, the setup to the battle. I would say that the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you could have it be then preparing for the battle, and then you have the rest of the episode, the rest of the hour or so, 45 minutes to an hour, be this nonstop action like they had last night. Now, of course, I do have my criticisms about the fighting, but I'll get to that in a second. But that is how you would, it would be a better construction. Then you allow there to be a major point, a major, you could have a major surprise, you could have a major character death at that point, and then all of a sudden goes out black, to be continued, and the battle continues on in the next episode. Then the next episode, you pick it up, and then for another 30 to 45 minutes, you have more of the battling, more of the ebbing and flowing that they were doing last night, and then finally you have the culmination of that battle, which could be with the Night King getting killed, like he was last night, or could be in a stalemate fashion, where all of a sudden you see the Night King is about to be defeated, and maybe he starts to say, okay, well, you know what, if I'm not going to win this battle, there is one battle that I can win. Boom, sends his dragon off to take over and to destroy Cersei in the south. Now, again, at least that would have been something a little bit more interesting than what what we ended up getting. But you see how this construction is there. 1 episode of filler, 1 episode of exposition, 2 episodes of action of battle. Then you have the 4th episode, episode of this season, be a filler episode. Setting things up, and then the last 2 episodes are a fight for the throne. Again, a bloody, huge battle for the throne, and then very similar, you have 1 episode end on a huge cliffhanger or on a huge plot point, and then you have the other episode pick it up where it left off and give it the ending that it deserved. I think that if you look at that basic construction from an objective standpoint, that just, I think, makes for much better storytelling, and unfortunately, we have not gotten it this season so far. We had 2 episodes that I liked a lot of parts of it. There were parts, for example, of the last episode with the knighting of Brienne, for example, was really cool, but there was also just a lot of things that weren't necessary, like, for example, Arya having sex, totally unnecessary. Didn't need that for her character, did not need that in the show, and obviously it caused a lot of controversy, but seriously, at the end of the day, it was just totally, a wasted moment on screen that they could have been dedicating to actually spending, I would say, more time on this battle. So talking about this battle, obviously, there are some things that I like about this battle, but there are also some things that I absolutely hate about this battle, too. It was way too dark. And I know that there's been like the common complaint across the board is everyone saying, oh my God, why was it so dark? I couldn't see anything. There were some people saying, oh, is there something wrong with your television settings? No, my television settings are great. The television that we have is great, and we've never had problems seeing in this show before until this episode, and we've watched all the episodes on the same television. And so therefore, I know it's not that. The reason why they did it this way is because it's a very easy and cheap way of not having to spend as much on effects when you have a darker screen, when you do those quick cuts. The first and very beginnings of the fight scene absolutely sucked. I'm not talking about when the Dothraki had the firing swords and they go into the battle. That actually was pretty damn cool to see them get swallowed up like that. I know that not everyone likes that because they say, oh, the Dothraki have now been shown to be useless. Yes. However, it was all to further the storyline that the army of the dead was mostly unstoppable, and that is what the battle, I think, did very well, was that the waves just kept coming. It never ended. They were the most powerful army in the world. Now, again, that's the reason why I do have a problem with the Night King dying in this episode. I think that if you had to kill him in this episode, that was probably one of the better ways to do it, and again, I know people are going to disagree with me on that, saying Jon Snow should have had that battle, and hey, I agree with you. I think that Jon Snow should have been involved in some way, especially when you look back and really think back about the other episodes that have been leading up to this point. With all that being said, though, the battle itself, if we're going to talk about it from an objective standpoint, sucked because the lighting up for it was absolutely terrible, and the CG was not good either. Once the actual army is being shown, and it's being shown almost as a wave, you can't really tell if it's actually... And again, this is the problem with the show being way too dark. Like the actual screen itself, the actual film stock itself, the actual set, the lights, the lighting for the set was not good for this because you could not see a damn thing. And I know they did it on purpose because, again, it saves them the moolah. It saves them the money on the CG, which when you did see it, it did not look very good. You couldn't tell if they were being actual dead bodies or dead spirits. And I'm pretty sure the Army of the Dead was supposed to be all like of a physical form, not of a spiritual one. And yet at one point, it literally looked as if they were a ghost like floating over the armies, over encompassing them. I know that they were trying to get it to be, there are literally so many that they're like falling over each other, but that just looks lazy. That just doesn't look good. And so that was my biggest problem with the battle, was the CG for the very beginning absolutely sucked. It was way too dark for the vast majority of the battle, and I think that definitely did it a disservice. Now, as the battle went on, it got better. As the battle went on, they started to slow things down. They stopped doing as many quick cuts, because that was the other thing that killed it too. It reminded me a lot of Harry Potter and I think it was the Deathly Hallows, where they had a lot of quick cuts in the forest scene, and I remember like watching that in the theaters and thinking, oh my God, this sucks, because you can't see anything, because they show something for literally like a nanosecond and then they shift to something else. And again, they do that because it means they don't have to have an actual fully fledged choreographed scene, and I don't think that's what we wanted. That's what most people wanted. I mean, again, most people I would say were happy with this episode, with happy the way it ended, happy the way it was presented. But I can tell you, as someone who is the critic, who is a cynic, who does try to look at things from a more objective point of view instead of just with raw emotion, because I will say, when Arya kills the Night King, I went, yeah, because I love Arya and I love that character, and I thought that was a really awesome, cool moment. Now, of course, you step back from that moment and think about it and you think, yeah, it would have been cooler to have Jon Snow there, and it would have been cooler to have other things happen, and for the Night King not to die in this episode. But again, if it's gonna happen, did not mind it happening the way that it did. Now, am I saying that the writing is good for this show? No, I'm not. I think that the writing has had a lot of issues for a long time now. Am I saying that there are some positive things in here that we can look at objectively? Absolutely. There are definitely some really cool things. Some of the effects look great. The White Walkers looked pretty damn cool. The Night King looked pretty great. The dragons, for the most part. In this episode, because of the CG fest, there were definitely parts the dragons didn't look that great. But for the most part, they have looked pretty stellar this season. So I think that this episode really failed the most part because it was supposed to all be about the battle, and they couldn't even get the battle perfectly right because of shoddy editing, shoddy cinematography, and shoddy CGI. And I think that that's what weighs this episode down for me, is that fighting scene. And I know that there are people out there who love it. I know there are people out there who hate it. I was listening over to the Nerdrotic channel with Doomcock, and I know that Doomcock was so pissed about this episode, and I can understand why he and Gary did not like some of the choices that were made, and I respect him for it. But I have to just be honest with you guys that overall, subjectively, I enjoyed it. I admit that there are absolutely objective problems with the characters and also with this show, and I will totally call it out on that, and that's why hopefully I try to point out some of the worst offenses objectively were the way they shot the fight scenes, because it really was bad. Like, it was cringe level bad. And that's why you have this article from Bounding into Comics where they say that the Battle of Winterfell is Star Wars / Jedi bite. I would say that the beginning of the fight scene with all the bad CG and everything, yes, absolutely would agree with you there. And I would say that there is a point to be made that there is, there's been this trend lately to try to subvert expectations constantly. You think it's going one way, but we're going to do the complete opposite. We're going to do something that no one expected. And that can only work within certain contexts. It can only work within certain parameters. And as I said, I don't necessarily have a problem with Arya being the one to kill the Night King. I don't even have a problem with Lady Mormont, who had that awesome moment of killing the giant, either. I do have a problem, though, when it comes to the way that this whole scene, the way this whole episode was shot, and also just overall, for the last few seasons, the way that these characters have been written into this state where now everything just seems so laissez-faire. It's the Night King's the big bad we've been building up for so many seasons, and now he's dead in one episode. I have a problem with that. Oh my goodness, Jon Snow, he is building up to this meeting with the Night King, and we just wasted your entire time. Because now you go back, and you might say, oh, you tricked me, you got me, I thought you were going this place and you didn't. But the problem is that now makes the past useless. Because now if I ever want to go rewatch the series, every single time I see anything with Jon Snow and the Night King, I'm going to think to myself, oh yeah, that's right, this doesn't matter. And it's just going to make me mad. It's just going to make me upset, because something that was, propped up for so long just never actually comes to fruition. See, there's good subversion expectations. For example, the Red Wedding. The Red Wedding was a great example of that, because so many characters died, but guess what? It furthered the story along, it made sense within the realm of the story, and it was presented very well. This one, not nearly as good as far as the subversion expectations, fitting in with the story, fitting in with it had been previously established, and also to the way it was shot is just not very good. But guys, what are y'all's thoughts about this episode? Are you a Game of Thrones fan? Do you still watch? As I said before, if you like it, didn't like it, I respect your opinion on it. I hopefully was able to talk to you guys a little bit about why objectively it had so many problems. And as I said, when I say I like this episode, that is almost entirely from a subjective standpoint. My opinion of this episode was mostly good because I watched the show with my wife and we enjoy this show together. And there are a lot of really great things. As I said, the actors to me are what make me keep watching this show, because they are just so awesome to watch on screen. And seeing all the training that Maisie Williams did for her role as Arya really makes me like her even more, because it shows that she's doing a lot of her own stunts. Wish we could say the same thing for people like Brie Larson, who says, oh, I do my own stunts, and then it's proven that she doesn't. To see her having these fight training battles and all the cool things that she's doing, it's really cool to see that she's doing that in real life. And so that's why overall I like the episode. I like that Arya was the one that got the kill shot on the Night King. Don't really like the timing of it. Don't really like the pacing of it. Don't like the actual cinematography, the CG, everything like that. The actual beginnings of the battle sucked. As far as, cinematically, it absolutely objectively sucked. And I'm glad that it got better as it went on. But as I said, I can understand why you would love it or why you would hate it as well. But I would love to hear your thoughts about this episode in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, smash the like button, give me a subscribe. Seriously, it helps me out a lot. I know I don't talk a whole lot about television on the channel, but I know that this is some pretty big news, and I'm a pretty big Game of Thrones fan, and I wanted to talk about this because it's probably going to be a little bit of a different perspective than you've heard lately, because I've heard a lot of my fellow YouTubers kind of hating on this episode, and I respect them for their opinions. I respect them for their thoughts, and I think that they do come from a good place, especially since a lot of them read the books. But I know a lot of other people who've also read the books that overall like like the direction of this show too, and so I wanted to present my own point of view as someone who has not read the books except for the first one, and overall has been a show person and was introduced to this through the show and not through the books, and how my journey has been with it throughout, this episode. We still got a few more episodes. There's still a lot of things that could happen. They could obviously do a lot of things to screw this up forever, and I know that many people already think they have, but, for me, at least from my own subjective standpoint, they still have a little ways to go to get to the Last Jedi level bad. So luckily, we're not quite there yet, at least in my own opinion. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and as always, God bless.